Hey everyone, this is Squid2259 and welcome to my DCS World F16 visual landing tutorial. Today we'll be going over some of the key factors to make those silky smooth, light as a feather landings in the F16 Viper.
So how do you bring your jet home safely every time? You make a plan. Give yourself enough time to decide how you're going to land your jet. Are you going to come in for the overhead? Will it be a left downwind entry? Or are you going to make a straight in? Whichever one you decide to do it early enough so that you can start maneuvering your jet and put yourself in a position for success well before you ever touch down on the runway. Making a good landing comes from the management of three things: altitude, airspeed, and angle of attack. Too much or too little of any of these things can result in a wave off or a botched landing. So let's take a look from the cockpit how all these things come together to make a smooth, consistent, controlled visual approach. Here we are in the F16 approaching Senaki-Kolki Airport for the overhead maneuver runway 27. As we make our way inbound, we're paying attention to our altitude and airspeed so that we're in parameters to conduct the maneuver properly. You're going to be looking for around 350 to 400 knots in airspeed and be between 1,000 feet and 1,500 feet in radar altitude to start the maneuver. You'll cross over the approach end of the runway, and when you hit mid-field, we're going to brake left into the downwind. Now, while conducting this maneuver, we know that it's to make sure that we bleed off speed into the downwind, but we want to pay attention to our flight path marker to keep it as close to the horizon as possible so that we're not excessively climbing or descending as we make our way to the downwind. Once we're about 90 degrees through the turn, we're looking for an airspeed of 250 knots, which will give us a good indication that we can start to lower our landing gear, and you want to pay attention to your heading to make sure that you're on the reciprocal that you were on from the approach end of the runway, in this case 090. We'll raise our seat to make sure that we can see over the nose at high angle of attack on final, and we'll throw the landing gear handle down below 250 knots. We'll check back again to make sure we have 3 in the green, giving us good gear lock indications, and we'll start working the power. Next thing you want to do is check over your shoulder to make sure you have good alignment with the runway. Alright, we got 2 alignment checks complete. Now we can start our left-hand turn on the base. Again, during these turns, you want to make sure that you're not excessively climbing or excessively descending so that you set yourself up for a good approach to the runway. Now, the F-16 likes to bleed off speed pretty fast, so if you increase your speed a little bit during this turn, that's okay. Just make sure you don't exceed 200 knots. We're checking back over to the runway, and it's looking pretty good so far. I think it's safe to say now that we're not going to roll out wide, and we can continue and start an increased descent to the runway as we roll out on final. Alright, we've gotten a little bit fast, so we're adjusting power as necessary, but now what we are doing is paying attention to our angle of attack. The best indication is the AO8 indexer on the left side of the HUD. That green donut means that we're doing good. Also, if you use the flight path marker and the lines in the HUD, there is a bracket that tells us whether we're going to be fast or slow on final as well in reference to angle of attack. On final, it's usually best to approach at 170 knots. Don't go any slower than 160 or you'll get the stall warning. But now that we're crossing the fence and we're going to make the runway, we'll initiate a flare. to give us a nice soft touchdown. Now that we're on the runway, we still want to keep the nose hiked up pretty high to get our aerodynamic braking. And right around 100 knots, the nose will fall, and you can still use the rudder for steering down the runway. Now above 75 knots, you want to use the brakes very sparingly. Below 75 knots, give it at good intervals. And then when the airspeed indicator goes cold, you can use max braking. Activate your nose wheel steering, and then you can actually use the wheels to steer you clear safely off the runway. Now that you're back in one piece, you can head to the ready room for debrief and start planning for your next mission. I hope you enjoyed this video and that you're one step closer to mastering the F-16. Join me next time when we take a look at the often overlooked and underrated skill of CCIP bombing in the F-16 Viper. This is DCS World with Squid2259. Peace.